I still got to give it to Premonition.
Yeah, is there anything else? Any friends you want to shout out? Any?
Mom, I love you.
They got to win first before they get the shout out.
Ooh. Oh, you're not prematurely declaring champions anymore?
Not this time.
Premature.
Premature.
We did have a talk. We did have a talk with Jack about prematurely declaring champions last week, as he unfortunately was giving it to Premonition.
Oh, we're not.
Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. We are just seconds away from hopping into the first game of MMT versus Premonition. So, gentlemen, before we hop into this, who do you all got?
I mean, based on performance alone from the previous weeks, I got to go with Primo on this one. I hate you.
Jack, don't need to ask you, but, in the interest of, new, fresh takes that we've definitely not heard before. Who do you
Premonition, 2-0.
Wow.
Confident.
I mean, do you want to qualify that?
I think so. Can
we just have another commercial? I mean, I really
just hit the button, commercial time.
We've seen MMT kind of grow as they went through the finals and stuff like that for China, but you want to see if they've gotten really big practice in the last 2 weeks. But at the same time, if they're not prepared for Premonition, if they're not prepared for them,
Are you making Illidan just?
I was gonna say, is Jack trying? Is he trying to do the thing we do?
I can see a bead of sweat pouring on his
He's
head.
like, if I just keep saying prepared, the people at home will know what I mean. Well, speaking of preparation, they have had, as I said earlier, a good couple weeks here to sit back and watch other teams and figure out what they can do better. So, as much as we are banking on Premonition because of what we saw last weekend, there is every reason to suspect that, both China and Asia Pacific have gotten better with their respective time. And, when we talk about how can you get better, we're talking about smarter polls, more attention to the interrupts you need to hit so that you're not wiping. There's a wide bevy of things that you can do in an invitational like this than, say if you were watching Heroes of the Storm, where you have to just spend months and months and months of getting better at all the smaller things. There's a lot of ways that you can quickly kind of rank up your skill in an invitational like this.
It's not just that, it's team comps as well, maybe starting to practice. Oh my god, look at those. Once again, we see MMT without a warrior. Maybe they saw, oh my god, where is it doing so much damage, started practicing a bit. Maybe it's still just a bit outside their comfort zone, or maybe they're waiting to bust it out later. We'll have to see. But I definitely want to see a lot of these games go into Game 3 to show how much practice these teams have put in.
And you're seeing, like you're talking about with Warrior and the comfort level. We've seen that a lot with actually a lot of NA teams where, some of them were trying to switch up to different healer comps. Some of them were trying to have, different DPS comps. Premonition did that quite a bit where they're switching between, Mage and Rogue, or they're switching between Unholy DK and Arms Warrior. So that's one thing, as they're having more time to practice, having more time to really grow here. It'd be very interesting to see, how ready that they will be. I was about to say prepared. How ready that they're going to be for, copying some of these other comps that have gotten some of the best times. Because we've seen the leaderboards out of Europe who've just been smashing some of these times.
Yeah, we also saw, to be fair, I think, Europe was the obvious talking about. We also saw North America hit some of those high times, so we can feel pretty good about that. But, definitely both regions kind of left China and Asia Pacific, with the exception of, honestly, kind of in the dust. So there's definitely, as we said, work to be done. If you are, someone watching at home, what do you think is like the one thing you guys have noticed that you can do better to get better at Mythic Dungeons? Is there like a specific thing that you have seen in terms of the way you do polls, the compositions? Like, what would you think is the most singular important facet for people at home?
Probably running with your friends and having, the comfort level of knowing the big polls, knowing when they're going to be having the big polls, aligning it with your big cooldowns, stuff like that. Because when you're just running it with some friends and stuff like that, there's a lot of times where, if you just wanted to copy one of the orders or something like that they're running with, it doesn't really translate if you don't have the cooldowns ready.
Yeah, certainly a lot to be considered of, but the Mythic Dungeon Talkvitational is over, and the Mythic Dungeon Invitational is about to begin. So, gentlemen, as we said, we are going to be starting off with Vault of the Wardens. When we see this map, obviously the trash polls stand out, in other affixes, but is there anything with Tyrannical, any specific boss you think could give teams trouble?
I mean, it's just, I think all eyes on the first boss, and Jack, of course, from the healing output needed later on, and maybe even Glazer. I mean, there's been such a substantial buff to his damage as well.
I could definitely see that happen. And right here, Premonition on the main screen with the red border is up there, and with MMT with the blue border in the bottom. So you're seeing Premonition, actually both teams just moving it forward. Premonition is pulling, of course, the large mini boss here, trying to take it down as rapidly as possible. Thankfully, it's not fortified, so they're able to kind of pull everything without much of an issue at all.
Yeah, so pretty typical pull here. Good punt there to make sure that they're out of the Sanguine. We don't want those mobs healed up, of course, for those at home. That Sanguine does provide damage to the players, stacking with the amount of pools, but also heals all enemies within those pools, so they want to make sure to move them quickly. Pretty typical first big pull pull here. Now, we did see that Team MMT took it a bit slower. They did not pull Glavion, one of the notorious mini-bosses known in these dungeons to be very, very dangerous. They're pulling her separately just because of how dangerous she can be. Premonition, though, got a pretty substantial lead by being able to cleave her down with everything there. Oh,
you see one death on Malvos from Premonition's side, but it was really cool how they actually moved to the right side of that foyer, pulled all the little Belcher mobs, and they switched over to the left side to go into the middle so that they'd be able to get everything all together. It was a really, really good pull in that they were able to get a lot of mobs quickly together and without much delay at all.
Yeah, I would definitely expect all of the trash here to be cleared prior to the first boss, including all the little Belchers. Pretty typical of teams to see that. Premonition is just kind of on the pull train right now. There's no signs of stopping. I mean, they're not having a breather between any of the packs. They just keep pulling right up to the steps here. Now, of course, some of these mobs are very dangerous, especially some of these Shadow Hunters and the Immolant Furies, of course. They do substantial damage, and the Demon Hunter mobs do transform at 50% health, increasing their damage substantially. Tons of cleaving, blinking around, and of course, that Myrmidon Naga Jack, is very dangerous, needs to be pointed away from the group as it does have a frontal cone silence.
Yeah, extremely dangerous here, and you're seeing really good movement on the part of E-Man, where you're seeing they drag all those mobs into the corner, they drag them there, and then they start dragging them up the stairs as they're making sure that they're getting out of Sanguine and moving towards the next location that they have to do here. It's really impressive.
So Pramo, of course, this is one of the most dangerous pack here with these Fel Infused Fury that we mentioned earlier as well. These do need to be interrupted when they transform, otherwise they will, well, basically one-shot the group. Of course, there's some I-beams that need to be hard interrupted as well. You cannot kick or silence them. They do need to be stunned, punted, disoriented, whatever have you. Now, Premonition, of course, finishing up the last of the trash here, getting ready to move on to the first boss, Tirathon, in just moments. Meanwhile, MMT is taking things just a bit slower and safer. They're only now starting on that final room.
I mean, you're seeing just a very big difference in between, the pull style, how quickly they're getting all the mobs together, the efficiency that you're seeing there. They're waiting for, making sure everybody has their drink, everyone's full mana. They're waiting for a little bit of RP before Tirathon actually gets started here. So, they have that little bit of time. It would have been nice to see Zach move forward, start any of the RP and stuff like that just a little bit earlier so they wouldn't have to wait that long. But, just a couple seconds here. It's not too big of a deal.
Of course, so let's chat about this boss for a moment. He does have 3 phases. He will transform, I believe it was 80% into his first Vengeance form, Demon Hunter, after which I believe at around 40% he will transform into the Havoc DPS form. Upon transforming the first time, he will throw his glaives that will then add a kind of fell chain around the room. We see those going out here. Players will need to maneuver around that well in the front of the room to make sure that they're not clotheslined by it, of course. You can blink through it. You can, transcend through it if those appropriate classes are in the group, none of which are in this group. The tank will also take substantial damage during the Dark Strikes, needs to have their active mitigation prepared. Otherwise, they will allow the boss to get a healing absorb shield. And of course, there's a ton of damage going out on this fight usually, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about just the different transformations to really look out for. I mean, we saw as he entered that 40% phase, the hatred that would come out, the little I-beams that would come out is really, it's something that you really, really have to be on your toes for, because we've seen, so many teams just go down from it. And you're seeing, everyone's pretty tightly packed in together, so when he answers that final form, it'll be very big to see everyone kind of spread out a little bit more, give each other some space, so in case that, the laser I-beams and stuff like that are going to be coming out. Right here, they want to make sure all the Fel Mortars, are being left behind them. And you're actually seeing a death on the part of Sistara. They're getting him up really quick. That's their only battle res that they actually have access to, because they do have a Marksman Hunter. So that's their only battle res that's already gone down really, really early in this fight.
So they do have to be careful here, of course. Once he's transformed into Vengeance, there will be pulsing damage on the group. Tirathon, of course, has thrown his Warglaives. Once he transformed, mysteriously he pulled a second pair of Warglaives out of nowhere. Meanwhile, the other ones are still whirling about the room. The hatred coming out now for the I-beam cast. This will be a one-shot mechanic for any player caught in that AoE area, so players very intelligently indeed move out. And you can just tell the amount of damage and how, fragile things are on this fight, because usually we see Zach performing, a much higher level of DPS right now. He's really taking things slow defensively, making sure everyone's topped up, especially with that one battle res that they've already used being down.
Well, it's one thing to kind of look at your cooldown. For example, you have the Paladin Wings, and you have to be very, very careful, with how well you want to be using it, or how aggressively you want to be using it here, because if you wanted to use it at the start of the fight, get some really crazy burst or something like that, then you're at risk later on to not be able to, have the healing needed later. So it's very good to see him use wings near the end of the fight, where there is high damage, but there's still the ability for him to deal a lot of damage as well.
Right, you are. Premonition, of course, moving over to that Imp Mother. Meanwhile, MMT trying to clean up Tirathon here in the top. They're 50% of the way through. We should be seeing the Havoc transformation in a moment. Premonition having quite a nice impact on those imps down there, making sure that they all die down equally, and they don't, of course, absorb the players and AoE grip them in. We're seeing the final transformation here in just a moment. There we are. On MMT side, they'll be working on that boss. Meanwhile, Premonition will be chewing through the rest of this foul Imp Mother to make sure that they can go downstairs and have access to Inquisitor.
I mean, you're seeing, right before the elevator boss, you're taking down the Fell Mother, making sure all the imps are getting down real quick. And you are going to be seeing, Hatred coming out here really, really soon out of the Tier-a-thon for MMT's side. And you're just making sure that they're able to dodge it, making sure that they're able to stay out of range. You're seeing the Hunter, I believe, is going to be baiting it out, or was trying to be out of range to make sure that it was staying out. So you're seeing Premonition, of course, is waiting for the elevator here.
Shocked to not see any avalanche potions coming out right now, actually, because the elevator was favorable for them. It was at the bottom there, so a bit of a misplay there. They just forgot about it, or they just judged the elevator coming out a bit too late. We do have a death over on MMT's side. One of their battle reses do go up right away. They do have one more. Keep in mind they do have 2 versus Premonition's 1. That one will be down for another 8 minutes or so. Of course, Premonition now going down the elevator on the way to Inquisitor Tormentrum. MMT just trying it right now to clean up Tier-a-thon. The last few percent here as the final beam goes out. They should be able to secure that. The Paladin getting so low, though. Stabilized at 11%, so everything's okay. They will be getting Tier-a-thon down in just a moment and moving on to the Imp Mother themselves.
It was very good that their Paladin for MMT was actually running with DC with your Grand Design. That jump, oof, an extra death going out there, and they're almost getting Tier-a-thon down. Multiple deaths coming out. They just have the tank and the Hunter alive at 0%. There we go. Just getting it down. But it's very, very scary there. I was going to say, it was definitely showing that MMT was, having proper defensive trinkets. You were seeing the Paladin having the Super's Grand Design. So when he dropped that low, he had such a large absorb shield out on him to be able to better survive that damage.
Right. So Tier-a-thon, of course, there did see an opening for killing one of the players and jumped at the opportunity. Upstairs here for Premonition, we have now pulled Inquisitor Tormentrum along with some of the dogs on the side. They do have to be careful because those dogs are rough. Now they're going to be opening up some of the jails on the side at 70 and 40% on Inquisitor Tormentrum. He will open 2 of 4 random jail cells, 1 at 70, 1 at 40. Of course, as I stated, you will have to deal with these mobs, and some of them are quite a pain in the butt, Jack.
Yeah, you're seeing it was really good that they actually pulled those dogs really early on. And actually, you are having another death by assist.
And they can't get him up.
And they can't get him up. It's continuous trend here going down early. But unfortunately, like you're talking about, they can't get him back up. He's at 65% here, so they still have a long way to go. And depending on which cells that they're going to be breaking open, it's really going to be tough not having your arms warrior there.
Of course, yep, Life Alert indeed not available for Sistara. They will have to take so long to deal with this Inquisitor. Now, as long as they CC interrupt the mobs properly, depending on the jails that pop out, they will have to be a bit lucky here with the next jail, making sure it's one of the more simple ones to deal with. This is going to take a while, especially because things are substantially slowed down by his Sap Soul ability, which of course does mean that the next ability that players cast will incur an extra 10-second cooldown on top of it. So you have to make sure to bait properly with either an ability that you're not going to use often, or of course, a Dispel. Some tanks can Dispel, healers can help Dispel someone as well, etc. And lastly, those eyes, those beams that we see from Inquisitor Tormentrum on the side there, if you're not facing those eyes, once the 2-second channel goes off, you will be disoriented.
It's actually pretty scary, the position that Premonition's in right now. We've seen this in the past where you're having multiple people go down. I think it was with Lethal when they were on Halls of Valor, and when they dropped a couple players, when they lost players, did not have battle reses, it just takes such a long time to be able to chew through all these mobs, all the boss health and things like that. And this really gives MMT the perfect opportunity to be caught up.
Yep, so Premonition, luckily we do have one of the easier corners here. We just have to clean up these little shawlings here. The only, downside to this one is once these die, these do put a debuff on players and they will explode after some seconds, so you have to make sure to spread out with those ads dying on Premonition's side. MMT, in the meantime, Inquisitor has opened their first jail cell. They are opting to do that LOS strat where they wait at the top of the stairs and make sure all of the mobs filter to them.
Yeah, but you're seeing they're trying to get everything in together. They're able to take care of just a large amount of just the AoE damage and burst that they can put out. Get all these mobs down really quickly, get them all stacked up together. Neither group of them has a blood DK, so they're not able to get any like the AoE grips out. So having that ability to just get everything stacked up together, you do have some downtime just to be waiting for everything to travel to you. I mean, they're going to have to get all this stuff down, knock the boss down to the next percentage, I believe it's 40% that you're saying, open up another jail cell, then they have to wait around for everything to come back to them.
So Premonition is now cleaning up Inquisitor. They'll be able to get Sistara back up after that. MMT, they're still behind. I mean, we still have about a 45% differential between these two bosses right now, and 4 deaths on MMT's side, so that's an extra 5 seconds that they'll have to hurry up and try to make up against Premonition. In the meantime, Premonition getting that res up in just a moment on Sistara, after which they will move over to the trash, which then of course opens up access to one of the next 2 bosses. They do it whichever order they want, either Glazer or Ash Golem. Typically Glazer is usually done third.
Yep, typically Glazer's first. So you're seeing there, they're entering, going after the Shavara, I believe it is. Getting her down very, very quickly. Thankfully, it's not bolstering, so you don't have to worry about any like the small mobs bolstering the larger one, all the big damage that can come out from that. So doing a very good job getting everything AoE down here. You still have to make sure you want to spread it out if possible, so the small mini boss is not getting healed, of course, by the Sanguine. So a lot of damage coming out. just to be able to get it all down. And you've seen, again, kiting backwards and trying to spread out as best they can for the quaking. We've seen a lot of damage, especially on MMT side, a lot of extra damage being taken from this quaking, where it's not a huge deal right now, but if you're looking at it getting into like later bosses or more tricky trash pulls, that might be enough to just knock people a little bit too low and get them down.
And that quaking does pulse for 20% of your max HP when you're standing within the circle, and of course multiplied by the amount of players that do overlap those circles. MMT side dealing with the Mogu Quillin side of things. They have 16% left. In the meantime, Premonition will be heading to Ash Golem, it looks like, actually. So they kind of hooked a right turn, heading over to Ash Golem first, which is, I would say, at least for me, pretty atypical, but you know, it's probably a CD management game that they're playing at this point. Ash Golem, of course, our favorite resident Molten Giant. He's usually encased in this Frost here at the start. You will encase him again very soon into the fight, and during that brittle phase, he will take 25% increased damage for roughly 20 seconds.
Yeah, maybe it's something where, because Sist was down for such a long time, they know that he's going to be able to have his cooldowns up and ready for something, so they'd rather have, you know, them use their cooldowns for Ash Golems, and they're able to just burst them down really quick, like you're talking about in the brittle phase, rather than, you know, using it for Glazer later on.
Of course, Ash Golem, as I did say, is now frozen, and they will indeed let it go for their DPS. They will DPS him down for about these 20 seconds, after which he will shatter and things will heat up as he will start spawning some fire adds on the corner. Everybody getting so low for MMT there, they just overlapped a few of those quakings. Luckily, no deaths for them. Ash Golem's health going down so fast. He does go back to his molten state now. They'll have to be careful to clean up some of these molten patches that go on the ground jack, as they do a ton of damage, but of course they also empower the little fire mobs that he does spawn.
Yeah, but you're seeing Zach right here. He pops his bubble, he gets on his horse and just cleans everything up so that you're able to just really reduce a lot of the damage that's going to be going out on the whole group. You know, reducing any kind of like little energies and stuff like that. You only have one of the little ember mobs that's up, and to be able to just, you know, target it, dot it up, get it down pretty easily.
Interesting to see that MMT, of course, does go over to Glazer instead, our favorite eyeball boss for the Legion. Ash Golem down to about 38% right now for Premonition. He likely will have another brittle phase coming up momentarily, one of the ads spawned there. Now Glazer, of course, up on top for MMT. We do have to be careful of these bouncing balls that he does. They do bounce off the wall once they go out and will target the closest target to them. So you can actually redirect them back into the boss, which unfortunately they do a pretty poor job of with 2 of the 4 orbs there. That's just a ton of free damage that you want to be pumping into that boss right now that they're missing out on.
And it's damage that they really need, because we've seen that overall their damage, not only their damage, but also their pull strategies haven't really been matching up to Premonition so far. You know, you want to see them taking any kind of advantage that they can. You're seeing Premonition, of course, getting that last brittle phase like you're talking about, and, you know, getting them down in short order, really. I mean, having all that extra damage out, especially when you're getting to, like, execute and stuff like that, and they're already moving on to Glazer, whereas, you know, MMT, they're just entering their first protected phase.
Yep, so they're going to shatter that shield now, of course, once that happens for about, we do have a death over on MMT. I don't know if they have another battle res available to them. They have had 5 deaths. Yeah, okay, he does come up, luckily. During this phase, after the shield is broken, he does take 100% increased damage, so you really want to pummel him and give him that black eye. Afterwards, he's going, I think about a minute later, he will have the second phase, so the goal here, certainly for the teams, is to make sure that they down him prior to another immunity phase. Those just take up so much time. Premonition, in the meantime, getting ready to pull Glazer themselves.
It'll be interesting to see just the cooldowns that were used. I believe we saw Paladin Wings a little bit earlier on MMT side, you know, near the start of the fight, where they're not able to take advantage of like the extra damage right here. So, you know, they're getting it pretty low so far. I don't think that they're going to... They might have another protected phase. We'll have to see.
They're just doing such a bad job, MMT, of getting hit by these orbs prior to them hitting the boss. Not only is that a ton of damage for the healer to heal, but it's just so much damage lost on Glazer. And at this pace, it looks like they're just going to have another immunity phase. And all that time that they made up by Premonition having to essentially 4-man Inquisitors pretty much lost here. Premonition, in the meantime, moving to Glazer themselves, and they will have their first immunity phase coming up momentarily. Of course, the point of this immunity phase is to make sure that you align the statues at proper angles in order to redirect and reflect his beam back into his own shield.
Yeah, but you're seeing, again, MMT getting another of these protected phases, whereas Premonition, of course, is just entering their first one. So what I'm going to be looking for here is just, you know, like Paladin Wings is coming up pretty early here, but all the light is being redirected, the shield's going down, Zach's got wings up, a lot of damage can come out. And again, you know, you're seeing, you want to be seeing the positioning here of being able to burn down all the health, and you're seeing, look at that, 4 in a row. All of the little blasts going out from the boss are going right back into him. There's very good positioning there, and making sure, like you're talking about, just getting more damage out.
Yeah, MMT now heading over to Ash Golem. Of course, you want to use any speed up abilities you could possibly use to get over to Ash Golem, such as the roar from the bear, you know, some of the play classes equipping Agrimars, all the seconds count. Premonition getting Glazer so low during that 100% increased damage phase. And by the looks of it, they will likely be able to one-phase him here and not have to incur another immunity phase, which is just a ton of time saved for them.
I mean, you're seeing, E-Man's already kind of posturing himself to be able to start running and get out of there as quickly as can. It looks like they will be able to just skip the entire second protective phase, so they're getting really close to it. There we go. And it's going down. So again, very good positioning to be able to get those extra blasts redirected back into the boss. A lot of extra healer damage is being pumped out on Premonition's side compared to MMT. Overall, it's just a very good confident showing.
Of course, Glazer goes down there. His eyes do close, and he looks like he's having a little shut-eye. He's going to come back in later dungeons in the future. Ash Golem being chewed through for MMT up on the main screen right now, taking advantage of that brittle phase, increased damage taken on the boss. They're really going to have to work that boss very hard to make sure that they have any chance of catching up to Premonition. Keep in mind that there's also a 10-second differential due to the deaths that they will have to overcome as well. Premonition, as we alluded to earlier, does indeed stealth by that jailer, which is just an inefficient mob to DPS single-handedly. It just takes so long.
And you were talking about avalanche potions. We did see some avalanche potions going out, but I don't believe Zach had used one. So it was very interesting to see. I don't think that all of them were able to make it down there in time, so some of them were a little bit slow, and I guess, unfortunately, it looks like he wasn't able to hit his avalanche potion, and just another death adding to the counter.
Yep, Zach did have a little tumble over the side there, unfortunately. They're going to incur another 5 seconds there. They do come down in the meantime. Now, of course, they did not have a very... Oh, Zach, okay, he's back down. He's going down.
2%.
He was going right back up the elevator. Now, of course, in this dark phase downstairs, one of the players will need to grab the light. Typically, it's the tank as they kind of lead the charge down here, that the trash packs, wanting to make sure that you expose the monsters down here that you do want to kill. You cannot target them unless the light is nearby, so they'll start with a small pack of spiders, after which they'll kind of jump down the side of the cliff, which is typical of teams to do, and deal with some larger pools down there.
You're seeing kind of a scary moment as Zach was trying to get more mana, as he was just trying to, get his feet back under him, of how people were just dropping very low with Quaking. So it was very good to see he was able to kind of jump in, get any kind of extra healing off, get people topped off here, and seeing everything getting stacked up really tightly in. Huge damage coming out, assist right here, 20 million damage right off this rip. Oh my goodness. Whew.
Premonition, of course, will have to deal with some of these Spirit of Vengeance on the side. They have a very large aggro range. They're very easily aggroed by any player nearby, and they're quite annoying to deal with as they do blink around randomly. You cannot just kind of drag them as you typically would with other mobs. So if anybody is in melee range of them that isn't the tank, they will get meleeed and potentially killed. So they have to be very careful not to be there, of course. That Spiderling is sitting in that Sanguine, unfortunately, does come out if it makes sure that they're not healed. And this last Spirit of Vengeance that you see marked with a skull on your screen on Premonition's side is the one that you need to kill in order to unlock the door and then access Cordon, the final boss of the instance.
You're seeing a very good job of them actually being able to pull all the mobs in together. We did see that Spiderling who actually was sitting in Sanguine for just a short amount of time, but they were able to get it back in. And the big thing I see here is just getting the Spirit of Vengeances to where you want them to be, because of course there is that Spirit of Vengeance guarding the door, but another one will also teleport up the more that you move closer to the door. Spirit of Vengeance will just jump into the fight there, making sure that's not in Sanguine, because it's so difficult to move. And Top Cat's proccing his cheat death here, going very low.
Rogue utility. At it again. The cheat death does go down. They won't have that ability for the final fight. This Broodmother has been killed the 3 times over by now. She just keeps sitting in that Sanguine. They did not plan their DPS out very well on those Spirit of Vengeance, so when they did die in their stationary position, the Broodmother was nearby, did heal a ton from that Sanguine, so a bit of time lost there. MMT now only making their way downstairs to this dark, cavernous area of the dungeon.
I mean, you're seeing, like you're talking about it, where, it's so hard to be moving these mobs around, and having something like a grip is so immensely useful that you're able to just save so much damage, so much time to be able to get all those different mobs down. And while it was very easy for the Spirit of Vengeance to be, getting into a good position that they wouldn't be sitting into the Sanguine, Broodmother gets sat in the Sanguine and then just keeps healed up so rapidly. It's so hard to deal with.
So, of course, here we are at the final boss of the dungeon, Cordana Fell's Song. She does have multiple phases, some you might call just intermissions. Oh, we do have another death go down for Sistar. I think by now their battle res should be up, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, there it is.
It does come up. So that is their only battle res remaining for the rest of this fight. At 75%, she will teleport away and spawn a shadow of herself that then steals the light from the players. However, there's a huge advantage here by having a hunter, as the hunter can flare her out of her position once she goes into the shadows and get her out faster, allowing players to DPS her further. Of course, at 40%, she will then transition to her 40-second immunity phase, where 4 walls was spawn with only a small safe area in them, and players will need to navigate well through those. Otherwise, they could get punted and killed from the punt itself, or also knocked off the edge and die.
Right here, you're seeing Zach, who has the lights. He's running around, making sure he's soaking up any of these little dark puddles that are coming out. You have to just stand with it by the light, get all of them evaporated, make sure that they're all dissipated completely. It was a very, very good, right as you were saying it, it was textbook by Malvos, getting the flare off, making sure that he's getting Cordana revealed again, and they're really not losing a beat here.
No, not at all. So Cordana will be going to an immunity phase. In the meantime, MMT working on opening that door in the lower screen. We'll see them in just a moment at Cordana. I mean, we talk time and time again. At this point, it's just Premonition's game to lose. They need a wipe in order for MMT to take this game. Raw DPS alone will not save them at this point. We do start the immunity phase here for Cordana. It is important for players to reveal the openings in these walls, which you do get a small sneak preview of when they first spawn to make sure that you can navigate safely. Of course, flare coming up from the Hunter there, that does not work anymore. It used to. It is something that they nerfed. Hunters just had apparently too much utility on this fight, so that's a no-no. And after the fourth wall spawns, we see Cordana's timer going down. She will come down from her immunity phase, and players will pull her to a set corner every time where another ad will spawn that needs to be killed or stunned in order to get rid of an immunity shield.
Yep, and you're seeing, they're probably going to be offered the stun, the very, very rapid stun, and that's what we saw out of the first ad that she had spawned. Get the stun off, she no longer has that immunity, and then you're able to just cleave both of them down. You're going to, of course, be making sure that E-Man's doing it right here. He's facing towards the interior of the room rather than facing towards the cliff, so she's not going to be getting kicked off the platform. Very quick dodge there by Malvos and Zach to be getting out of the way of that glaive that was coming out there. And again, you're seeing the kick coming out. E-Man's getting instantly back in, and right here, they're just able to burn them both down very, very rapidly. Zach's just making sure he's sitting in melee, dissipating any of those little extra puddles, and it's very, very quick, clean run by them overall.
And Cordana just going down, and it looks like Premonition's going to take this one. I wouldn't say really cleanly. They certainly had, they have 5 deaths on the board, both teams do, but Premonition does take this first game and goes 1-0 in the series against MMT.
Yeah, that's going to be a quick 1-0 from North America's Premonition, and this lines up with, I think, about what we expected coming into this. Obviously there's still more series to be played out, but we were really looking at Premonition coming in. They were the #1 seed in North America. They had a very convincing performance last week, and we were looking to see them do good work. But I want to touch on the point you brought up, which is that yes, they got the win, and you could just tell the DPS differences and just watching how the teams were progressing. But that really wasn't as clean as it could have been. You pointed out the manipulation of the Sanguine pools at points, some of the respect to Quaking. There's certainly room for Premonition to clean it up in the next one.
I think the biggest thing to note, and we can see it here on the splits with MMT, is MMT really did not play badly. I think they're a new team compared to what we saw in that first week with the China Regionals. They played very well. They did fall behind a bit, but the biggest thing was just, again, Premonition had those bigger, riskier pulls with all of that trash leading up to the first boss. Look at the differential on the splits here between MMT and Premonition leading up to Terrathon. That's just where Premonition just went through the whole thing. Chain pull, big pulls, and you could see it from the start with MMT. They just played it so safe.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing. Yeah, too safe. I would agree with that. But there's one thing we were talking about where, yes, there were a couple deaths, and I think there was, a little bit of nerves moved in with Premonition where they had, some stupid deaths where they really didn't need them at all. But they were so well refined with their pulls. They were so well rounded, just making sure they're getting everything together that even though, like you're talking about, Sanguine got into some of the brood mothers, Sanguine got into a little bit of this, a little bit of that, they were able to make up for it just because they were pulling so much more cleanly.
Yeah, Slow and Steady wins the race in a lot of situations, not in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, unfortunately. But touching on what you said, MMT did certainly look better, I think, in this small sample size than we saw them in Week 1. So they've obviously made the improvements, but I think their failing here was kind of something we saw a lot last weekend, which is if you play these games not to lose, if you just play them to be, slow, consistent, just down a pack, move to the next pack, down a pack, take your time. Unfortunately, at this stage of competition, you are going to have a real problem if you're trying to win. And this is what MMT is going to have to look to correct in the next one. And, historically speaking, teams have not had an easy time changing it up, right? We've seen teams kind of get locked in their approaches. And even in situations where, we're feeling, okay, they have to mix it up, they have to go faster, there's a lot of reluctance because if you take that full wipe, not only do you have to start with the resets, you take those 5 seconds, just a 25-second death malice in total. So it's really difficult for these teams to kind of change it up.
I mean, it is, but go big or go home, high risk, high reward. You have to do it. We mentioned this time and time again, we're not here playing for an extra piece of loot from the chest. Maybe some people are. You shouldn't be, though. This is a race.
I think Rich is. Rich just wants to loot.
That's true, Rich. They got to play better. And, of course, at a point, MMT probably knew that they were behind. And, maybe they had a fair bit of catch-up. They fell behind on the trash. They fell behind on Glazer. But at the end of it, they had just entered their Cordana immunity phase. when Premonition was cleaning it up, not that far behind in the grand scheme of things. Both teams 5 deaths apiece as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but it's also kind of interesting to think about, like, when we're talking about, oh, we know we're behind, we have to catch up. Where are they going to catch up at? All the trash, like 53% or something like that, is in the very, very beginning. So right off the bat, you know, Premonition makes this statement where they're saying, we're going to get all this trash pulled more efficiently. We're always moving towards where we need to be going here. You know, we're always moving closer to the boss here. So when that happens, you know, we've seen in other dungeons like Nell Slayer or Dark Heart Thicket or something like that, where they say, oh, we're behind, we can make these aggressive plays because we have to. In Vault of the Wardens, they really don't have that option. It's just more boss damage, you know, and keep moving as cleanly as possible and try to mimic, you know, how, you know, closely that a Premonition's kind of moving towards the next group.
All right, well, we're going to go right to the map pick, and again, this is going to be China's MMT's pick in terms of where they want to go. Again, the story thus far has been, you know what, if you have the pick and Neltz is on the board, you take Neltz, but MMT going to mix it up here and go ahead and bring out Dark Heart Thicket. So Dark Heart Thicket is a map we've definitely seen a bunch of over the course of this invitation.
And for sure, and we always see it on Tyrannical, and of course that's no different here. And we're now moving to Teeming Volcanic Tyrannical. And Jack, you and I talk about this a ton, and Rob as well. It's that Shade of Xavier is so scary at the end. So many one-shot mechanics. We're going to see players busting out. You know, Pridus, Legendary for that Absorb potentially, maybe even going to a Stam Flask.
Yeah, I want to shout out to myself real quick that I have also joined the Pridus Club. So
that's right, congratulations.
We were actually just talking about it backstage, Xavius on Tyrannical. Like that's something we're having that Legendary actually just helps a ton.
Yeah, and you're seeing right here, again, going over it, we saw Premonition, for example, you know, quarterfinals last week. They ran with an Unholy DK just to be able to have that extra battle res available to them because there is so many things that can kill you. And again, if it's only on the tank that has a battle res, there's, you know, I mean, we saw some really scary pulls by Premonition from on Drezeron to be pulling so many extra Whelpling packs all at once, way more than we've seen from other groups. And, you know, it really looked like he was going to be going down, but he just stayed, you know, E-Man just stayed rock solid and was able to keep himself topped off. But I really will expect to see at least some other battle res coming out of Premonition to be prepared for this.
Yeah, I mean, for Guardian Druids, that damage is pretty bearable at the end of the day. We have our comps in, though, and taking a look to see if MMT switched anything up. And no, they're sticking exactly the same. And
sticking to their guns.
That is definitely a point of interest to me, you know, as again, they lost that by a fair margin, but, you know, I guess they're just going to say, hey, we'll just do it better this time. MMT has to win, though, or this is the end of their journey in the Mythic Dungeon Invitational.
Let's not forget here, we do have teaming as well, so we're going to be seeing 2 double bear packs, you know, one early on and, of course, the mandatory one prior to the boss. They only have 1 rogue. I mean, they're going to have to skip, you know, at least one of them usually.
Yep, and you're seeing right here, of course, in the red border, Premonition going in for very, very big pulls. MMT, of course, actually, Premonition is pulling the bears while MMT is not. MMT, of course, is in the blue border at the bottom. Very, very big, scary pull here by Premonition.
Lots of animals involved here. Of course, there's cats, owls, and bears. The cats.
Oh my.
Oh my, indeed. Grizzlies, of course, are one of the most dangerous here for the tank as they do have a frontal swipe and that huge maddening roar AoE on the teams. But the cats themselves are also very dangerous. They do jump on distant players and can deal a ton of damage. You'll find you can kind of calm them down a bit if you buy them a cappuccino at Starbucks later. But moving on after that, we are moving on to the 2 Hippogriff pack. MMT, again, we already saw Jack, just like last dungeon, from the get-go, they pulled safer. They pulled the 2 cat packs and now are dealing on the bears themselves, whereas Premonition just pulled everything and cleaved it down together.
Yeah, but you're seeing quick death coming down on Sist by that charging Razorbeak there. You know, it's always just very scary to be watching out for, especially because, like you're saying, it is teaming, so you have another one that you have to be worrying about, another one that you have to be dealing with here. So, you know, I was actually pretty surprised that they had no deaths at all, how cleanly that was for that very scary trash pack with all of the cats, the bears, like I said, the whole zoo was there, and it was just very, very clean work there. So it's just kind of a little bit surprised to see something like the Razorbeak, which is a straight up charge. You have to just watch your positioning there. You know, another stuns coming out, just make sure that they're all getting down in short order here.
I do like there that they made the right call and did not use the battle res on just kind of that trash pack that was not too dangerous. Star did release and just kind of run back, so they do still have that trash pack available. In the meantime, we go down to the open area here. It's very dangerous and very easy for some teams to pull some of this accidental trash on the side, which mostly you do want to skip. They're dealing with the final cat pack here, after which they'll proceed onwards towards the first boss. They'll have a couple of other trash packs, Blade Dallas, of course. MMT still dealing with that Hippogriff pack. That should be going down momentarily. At this point, they're a few seconds behind, but it's probably been almost canceled out by the fact that Premonition does have 1 death on the board already. MMT still playing it clean. It's paid off for them, but they do have to get going in order to stay in this tournament.
And that's what the thing is, like, if you're taking these extra risks, if you're getting a little death here and there, well, you're killing these mobs way faster. You're going way more rapid through these. So even if you're getting a death here, it's actually not that big of a deal because, yeah, you're adding to the time timer, but the time it takes you to AoE down these 2 or 3 trash packs altogether, whereas they're going one at a time. I mean, you're even seeing here, MMT, even though they're taking it slower, this is a pretty simple trash pack that they had. You know, they're still having 1 death coming out.
Right, you are. Premonition indeed does stealth past these 2 bears before Gladealis himself. Premonition does. I'll expect MMT to be doing the same thing down in their cam in just a moment. Gladealis pulled almost instantly in just a moment here. They're preparing. Now, of course, this is tyrannical. This boss does hurt. Let's talk a bit about Gladealis right now. He does have a bear form transformation where he will frontal and punt the tank in front of him, and then also do a charge. Anything caught in its path will take massive damage. And most importantly, especially Jack, for you know, he does have that cat transformation where he will leap the furthest target and apply a grievous bleed to them that only gets worse until you reach above 90% HP.
Yeah, you're seeing in short order here, Zach is moving himself so that he is the furthest target away, and you're seeing he's able to kind of jump in here, deal a little bit of damage, drops his consecration, add a little bit of damage because he knows that the cat jump is not happening yet. Then he knows that the cat jump is going to be happening soon. He jumps back out, is able to take the cat jump, get himself topped off again, and then kind of do the same thing over and over again. And it's a very, very clean way of doing it. It's very efficient. You see the second he gets jumped on, gets himself topped off really quick, runs into melee with wings up, adds a bit more damage here. It's a very, very good flow that's coming out of Zach here.
Right, you are. Jack, MMT, of course, moving on. They do pull Gladealis themselves. I do very much like what Premonition's doing. We do know that once he does transform in the bear, if he kind of charges into nothing and there's no area for him to actually cover in front of him, he will automatically cancel his bear form and not only keep him closer for all the melee to keep DPSing, but also the tank will not take nearly as much damage. They will also have to be careful of those little Shaw ads that do fall from the sky, as they do leave that kind of nightmare goo on the ground. You certainly don't want to step in that. Does a ton of damage. MMT in the meantime just chiseling through Gladealis' health. He's already down to 70%. There's a 50% differential between the 2 teams now.
And you're seeing huge damage going out on the Abominations, the Shroudlings, making sure that they're getting down as rapidly as possible to make sure that they have the most surface area that they can so that they're not having to just be running all over the room here. I mean, you're seeing MMT, for example, you know, is not really positioning. They are positioning actually around the rock. They're using the rock just to be able to quickly cancel out that bear form there. But it's also very interesting because they're kind of sitting in the middle of the room, and you're always having to look at the Paladin for MMT, you know, repositioning himself constantly to make sure that he is further behind the Hunter.
It is a rock-solid strat indeed. Premonition does finish off their boss. They start moving on to the next trash pack. We see some new trash monsters here. Of course, the 2 Lashers, the Flowers. Nothing too bad to deal with. They do hit the tank a bit harder than average of some of the other mobs. They do have some AoE on the ground that you want to move out of as well. Of course, the irritating thing here is the Dryad. She does run away frequently, and they do not have a DK or Vengeance Demon Hunter to be able to grip her back into the group, so they'll want to make sure they CC her constantly to have that cleave efficiency still be 100% uptime for them.
Yep, and you're even seeing with these affixes, it's not even that big of a deal to be focused targeting one, you know, having one die a little bit early. You're not having Sanguine, you're not having Bolstering or anything like that. So it makes their life a lot easier so that they are able to really just play it very aggressively. Hunter almost going down there. I believe he was accidentally leafed on, so you're seeing the quick bop coming out from their Paladin to make sure that they're able to get the dot off him as rapidly as possible. And then, of course, they're getting MMT, getting Gladealis down right as Premonition is posturing themselves for another big pull.
Of course, Premonition does skip that first Keeper pack that we so often see. Keepers, of course, being one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt mobs in this dungeon, as they do have an aura that consistently heals any of these blossoms nearby for 5% HP per second, I believe. Quite a lot to chew through in one of these dungeons. Premonition, typical pull here, pulls a ton of the Flowers, getting ready to deal with this next double Keeper pack. Now, typically, groups do skip this next pack, whether it be Rogue Stealth, which you know they've already used, or Invis Potions. It looks like they're opting for the Invis... Oh, they actually pulled everything. They're dead already. I didn't even see them on the side. or did somebody pull them to the side here?
I believe we're only seeing 4 on the screen right now, and Top Cats is away.
Yeah,
so I would assume that he pulled everything away just to get a vanish off, and he'll be joining them in short order.
Because I was sure I didn't see a Keeper in the prior pack.
It would have been way more damage, would have been way more mobs. You know, it's just a lot more that they don't need to be dealing with right now.
Yeah. So however they have done it, and other different groups have different strategies for doing it, they did manage to get past that 2 Keeper pack. Of course, MMT just now skipping the first Keeper pack, moving on to what we see in front of the screen, the double Keeper pack that we were just mentioning. Of course, on teaming, there are 3 Keepers in this. It just it makes it take so long. MMT pulling those side Flowers as well, the Blossoms moving over to the house. Now, that aura range from the Keepers is actually pretty big, even if they're not in combat at the moment, so they have to be careful not to get them too close. In the meantime, Premonition dealing with the final Dwellers, or the gooey guys, as we like to refer to them, that are required to be killed, all 5 of them, prior to spawning the second boss, Oakheart, everyone's favorite resident tree boss.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Do you have more prepared for this?
I don't prepare anything for this.
Sure. Of course, going into O-Card here, you have to really watch out for the crushing grip coming out that will be going out of the tank here. And it's something that you always have to be keeping an eye on. Luckily, these affixes aren't too scary as a healer perspective here, but when you go into something like Grievous, it's really, really scary. Having the Stomp going out, big AoE damage. We saw, last week in the quarterfinals where you had Quaking coming out and the Stomp coming out, dropping people super, super low. So it's definitely it's something you always have to stay on your toes about as a healer, of making sure that you're having the right positioning. I mean, you have a Paladin here, so you're able to quickly just Blessing of Freedom yourself and just start running through all the routes that are going out.
Yeah, that AoE Stomp, as you said, is indeed very, very dangerous. There we see the crushing grip on the tank. He goes quite low with it, does a ton of damage. In the meantime, we have some troubles over at MMT's side.